Hello, lords and ladies of the internet. I'm King of Candor, and today I'm going to be talking about Pathfinder removing Drow from their setting. So, about a week ago, the Pathfinder team hosted something called Piezo Con, where they talked about all their upcoming games and adventure paths. I have linked that live stream below where they talk about it if you want to watch it. But there's a lot of extraneous detail about the upcoming adventure paths. They don't go into the Drow till much later on. The full article on them will be released in the upcoming adventure, Sky King's Tomb, and they'll be explaining the details there. However, this specific panel is about the second part of that adventure module, called Into the Darklands. For those of you who only play 5th edition, or are only tangentially familiar with Pathfinder lore, the Darklands are their version of the Underdark. Pathfinder originally was a replacement for 4th edition and kept a lot of the conventions and features from that setting, including the Drow. Because the OGL controversy from earlier this year, a lot of Pathfinder lore is being rewritten to not use the OGL at all. Piezo claims this is so they can use their upcoming license, the ORC or ORC, and have all remnants of the OGL removed. On the Drow specifically, they felt like they couldn't add any new lore to them, and they were too tied to Dungeons & Dragons. Now, Dungeons & Dragons does not own the rights to Dark Elves. However, Piezo felt theirs was too similar. See if this description is helpful. A culture of elves with purple skin, usually possessing white hair, that also live underground in a matriarchal society. They worship a god or goddess who is violent and hell-bent on suffering, that also has spider elf hybrids called Driders. They wear BDSM gear and launch raids on the surface for slaves. Advancing in their society requires backstabbing and brutality, with multiple feuding houses making up society. They also love poisons and mushrooms. I think you can kinda see the problem now. Pathfinder felt like they couldn't do anything new or interesting with their Drow, so they removed them and turned them into something called Cavern Elves. This means that players who are currently playing a Drow can keep them. They also said that all previous content is still balanced and playable, just they will no longer be using Drow in their future adventure paths and lore. So, you may be asking, what are they going to replace their underground big bad guys with? The answer? Snake People. These Snake People are hinted at in previous Pathfinder lore, so this is not an entirely new creation. However, them existing underground in large numbers is. They have not talked a lot about what these Snake People are and what are they doing underground. I'm not sure how they will be filling the void that Drow left. However, they said they'd be talking more about it in their upcoming books. From an in-universe perspective, this is actually quite interesting. Apparently, one of the explorers who first discovered them lied. There is a lot, and I mean a lot, of lore and adventure modules that use the Drow over the years. In fact, I remember one of the big selling points of the third Pathfinder adventure path, Second Darkness, was the fact that the Drow are back and badder than ever. A lot of people at the time had felt Dungeons & Dragons had made the Drow too soft, and this was supposed to be them even more powerful and cruel than the versions you were used to. I'm not sure how they're going to rectify all these changes. I'm not even sure if I like them changing it. But if I had to change it, Snake People are probably the best choice. Something I want to talk about is the way modern fantasy games seem to be constantly changing themselves for modern politics. I know we've seen a lot of games remove races and stop talking about slavery because they're afraid of causing harm. However, I don't think this is one of those situations. Based on the way the Piezo team has talked, it seems they really want to have a more unique spin on their setting, making it less of a knockoff of Dungeons & Dragons and the Forgotten Realms. I absolutely hate a lot of what Pathfinder has done recently with their lore. Some, if not all, of the changes are stupid in my opinion. However, this is a good reason for a change, I think. It comes from a place of creativity in wanting to have a unique ownership of their setting. I understand how a lot of people are concerned about the modern politics infecting their games, but I think this is not one of those situations. I know a lot of people have just said they should change the lore a little bit and maybe rename the Drow, and they've done that for other things such as Dwergar and Strefneblin, also called Deep Gnomes. However, I think the Drow are far too associated with Forgotten Realms for that to work. Thanks, Dritzt. I know other settings such as the Elder Scrolls and Warhammer have Dark Elves that are sadistic, but these Dark Elves are also unique and have a well-ingrained role in their world. If someone were to design a setting from the ground up and wanted to include Dark Elves like the Drow, I think they would be fine. It seems to me, though, that Pathfinder really wants to be unique so they can copyright their own material. On that point, I think we need to talk about the ORC, the Orc, and how that explains a lot of the situation. The OGL controversy that I covered earlier in the year really spooked a lot of people, rightfully so. A company such as Piezo, which is the second place competitor to Wizards of the Coast, definitely would rather carve off a handful of races to ensure they don't have any chance of being sued. If you or I were to make our own game setting, and that has something like Drow, it would not be worth the finances to sue us. Piezo, on the other hand, made $12 million last year. That was the highest grossing year yet, and they're still growing. That's definitely a worthwhile fight to lawyer up with. I know a lot of people are disappointed by this change, and I would say rightfully so. I just don't think this is coming from the same place a lot of the terrible changes over the last few years have. Just because I can still understand it doesn't mean I like it, though. I dislike the rest of the stuff they've changed in the game. Piezo is still a flawed company, and that's why I'm making my own game still. That is the news and my thoughts part of the video. I'm now going to talk about how I would fix the Drow if I was in charge of Pathfinder and worked at Piezo. If that's all you wanted, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. So, what could be done to improve this situation? How would I rewrite the Drow here? In Pathfinder, the Drow go underground to escape something called Earthfall, where a massive meteor is summoned and crashes into the planet. This meteor is summoned by some fish monsters called the Algol-Ith. These fish monsters basically used mind control to set up the first human civilizations and rule from the shadows. Eventually, the humans figured out what was going on, and the elves decided to flee instead of helping. However, some of the elves stayed on Golarion and became the Drow. These Drow went underground to hide from the meteor impact. The impact woke up an evil god named Rovagug, and that's who corrupted them. Knowing all this, what would I do different? I would make the Drow more focused on fire magic and maybe earth magic instead of poison. This already starts them differently and fits with the deep underground better in my opinion. From there, instead of simply being sadistic demon worshippers, I would make these Drow more like zealots on a crusade to save the world. As far as they know, all the people on the surface have been corrupted and are controlled by these fish monsters. That's why they simply use them as slaves and view them as disposable. Those on the surface have already been lost. I also think that Drow would have their torture techniques explained as them attempting to root out the corruption from these fish monsters. I can understand keeping the matriarchal stuff because that's key to a lot of Dark Elf depictions, but I personally don't think it matters. Now, their armor, that would need a change. I would say that the elves that have been encountered thus far are mostly scouts and raiders, which is why they wear light armor such as leather. I would give them more of a heavy armor aesthetic in their own cities, as heavy armor elves is not something we see very often. I would also make sure that many of them are equipped with headbands that make it so they cannot be mind controlled, and stopping mind control is part of their core ideals. Their physical appearance changing to purple skin and white hair I would still keep because it lets them stand out from other elves, as well as their brutality. I would not, however, have them be brutal to each other. But they're very suspicious of everybody because the race has been screwed over by many people and understands that an entire society can be mind controlled and not even know about it. They would have a lot of inquisitions, and instead of simply backstabbing each other, it would go down more like witch trials or inquisitions. I also wouldn't have them ally with Driders. These should be creations of another monster that are despised by the Drow, giving them an interesting twist on that system. I also wouldn't have the multiple feuding houses. That's very closely related to the Forgotten Realms and their depiction of Drow, and instead have the society more unified, but constantly tearing itself down as people are paranoid that somebody at the top is being controlled by the fish monsters. I would also rename them to something like Dorkarfar or Stratalfar, which are Norse names for dark elves. Well, technically those names might also be for dwarves, but Norse mythology is strange, so I'll just use them as elves. The other thing I would do is make the Drow despise the ocean, and whenever they came to their surface, they frequently destroy boats. I would also have them constantly waging war on any nearby gillmen or merpeople, assuming that they are, of course, under the control of the fish monsters from earlier. That is all for today. Thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed the content, I'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I'm looking forward to your candor and comments below, and have a great day.